last year, which was sort of a very confused show because not only did they have Indian artists, but they also had French artists in it. But there is perhaps sometimes a tendency to choose works which affirm the place where they come from, or I think that's always a danger. What I think is more interesting is how some artists were aware of that danger, subverted either ironically or playfully. But it's interesting. I mean, it's hard to sort of pin down collecting patterns, but you have collectors in Europe who are interested in a particular work, and so they're responding to it because they like what they see in the form and express, and not necessarily because it's other or it's sort of exotic or from elsewhere. And I think certainly the kind of art I've been interested in, or what we showed in the summer, we were going first of all by in terms of what kind of formal innovation we were seeing, or how, when you mentioned earlier on tradition as an important factor. I think that's inevitable in all cultures, and what is interesting is how that dialectic between tradition and the new, which is very much part of modernity, goes back to Beaux there, is precisely how artists keep on reinterpreting their own tradition, or subverting them, or recoding them differently. So I think you have enlightened collectors who are collecting on a long-term basis and who are responding to the work after having really seen other kinds of work and educated their eye, and not just collecting because it is coming from other parts of the world. Although, of course, there are collectors who collect in Chinese art. And I think also one other thing is that it's important to do a big sort of survey show in a context where the art from the country, India, for example, isn't known. But I think after a stage, it doesn't make much sense to go on having those survey shows, because it's then when the problem of the whole thing about national identity or nationalism, so to speak, which is always a vexed category that comes in. But I think certainly in terms of bringing something new to a public who doesn't know anything about what's happening in other parts of the world, I think at first it comes down to the fact that, who takes the initiative to bring something first, and then, of course, whatever success that exhibition meets, and you mentioned, of course, that a lot of the art in Indian summer did go on to do very well. But I think after that, they're now free they've become part of a much larger orbit, and I personally would be, for example, interested in doing shows, which I have done, which mix Indian artists with non-Indian artists, according to whatever theme I have in mind. But I do think sort of national shows do serve a purpose initially, but the danger is to not let that become a kind of sort of, make that a kind of, to repeat that again and again.
No, I just think. I think it's true. As what you say, I think you can. If it becomes a template that it gets repeated, I think you can move on. I think it's important that when I speak with artists, generally speaking, they never tell me I'm a Pakistani artist, I'm a Tibetan artist. They say I'm an artist. That's the first thing. Is So things, even though you cannot, as Rashid say, somehow you cannot completely remove your identity. And in a way, there are different ways that artists deal with it. And some artists never resolve that issue. Some artists resolve it maybe in the practice. Some artists resolve it different ways. But you cannot. You have to. I think you have to understand that artists in general want to be part of the international discourse, and they want to be considered artists first, and then that one is Bangladeshi, Pakistan.
So one other point I just want to make very quickly. Of course, identity is a very sort of complicated issue generally in the humanities, of course, and also in contemporary art. But I think you can't get rid of it, but you can't also not do without it somewhere. And for example, if you think of just one historical example, in India there was this wonderful and perhaps the only minimalist in inverted commas artist called Nasreen Mohammadi. And obviously, when you see Nasreen Mohammadi's work, with, let's say, similar work done earlier on, or parallel at the same time, in America, or with Atkins Martin, many examples. I think it's also interesting to note that although it's all abstract work, that a very distinctive body of abstract work was made by an artist in India with resonances with minimalism elsewhere. So I think that's where also, the fact of being Indian is not primary, obviously, but it does, I think, help additionally as a kind of supplementary knowledge that it helps to, I think, build world map better, and to map art in an international context better. As long as those maps are always fluctuating and provisional and subject to sort of reinterpretation.
It certainly, I think, is a challenge for any artist and curator working within this environment. And I think you have the advantage of both being an insider and an outsider. In fact, I think all of us do have that advantage. And I will kind of seg into another point that was brought up earlier in the first panel with the fact that, Fabio, you live in Hong Kong, which is a part of China. You're watching the burgeoning international scene that is taking place within the region. And looking at, say, many of the government initiatives to fill the hundreds of museums that are taking place in the region, are any of these spaces looking at sort of pan-Asian collections, say such as the Fukuoka Museum in Japan? And as a commercial gallery director, what do you think needs to happen for this art scene in South Asia to grow?
That's a big question. I think that, of course, there are lots of, as we all know, there are lots of museums being built in the region. In particular, there are lots of museums built in China, as we know. I don't think there is any idea yet of what they're going to put in the museums. Very often these are private museums which are built with in a very different way that private museums were built in America. For example, I don't know, the Frick collection in New York, etc., Guggenheim itself. They're really private in the sense that whoever builds them has complete be sold in the future. So it's slightly ambiguous in that sense. So we don't know yet what's going to happen. There's a huge project in Hong Kong that is the M+ project, which has been talked about for years and years and years, and hopefully it will eventually happen. And I think the mission is to be fairly pan-Asian with a focus on Hong Kong, of course, and in Greater China. I think that I don't know how much we can expect from the public sector, from the government in general, in any of these regions. I think you've seen what happened in India. Is really private individuals like the Pradas and that have done something that is actually meaningful and public in the end. And I think my encouragement to any collectors in the region is actually to become engaged and involved, whether it's with the artists or with the galleries, and to support projects that are not necessarily commercial projects, but have, whether it's a permanent building or just a temporary exhibition or just an artist project. We talk about a project that I particularly was involved last year of an artist that moved 20 tons of soil from Tibet all the way to Dharamsala. And the only reason was to honor his father who had died, and the only reason he did it was, the only purpose was for 48 hours people could stand on Tibetan soil in Dharamsala, and there was a microphone, and they could say whatever they wanted, and people were praying, they were crying, they were laughing, they were smelling the soil and tasting the soil. And then after 48 hours it got dispersed, everybody could take home as much soil as they wanted. And so there's no, and it wasn't, I don't want to say numbers, but it wasn't, it was a very expensive project to put together, and it had no commercial resonance, but it had fantastic resonance throughout the world. Tibetans were blogging from San Francisco, from Zurich, from wherever, and saying, I'm crying while, I'm watching this on the web because it was streamlined live, and I'm crying thinking about my home and what it means, the fact that I haven't been able to set foot in my home since that. So I think all of these are things that I think individual collector can, with a bit of courage, can inspire artists to do. And I think we cannot, as I said, I don't think we can expect yet too much from the institutional side of it. I think it's hopefully something we wish that it will happen, but it might take another